Did it say something?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it said it's being recorded.
I'm not sure like how familiar you are with like the stuff I've put on the internet or whatever. If you've seen my videos or the things I've written or what or whatever. I'm not exactly sure how familiar you are with my circumstances.
No, I've so pretty much I found you. I think on the Awakening subreddit, I was just going on there like
Yeah,
randomly, and
sure.
I like found you had commented on someone's post with like a link to your YouTube.
Yeah,
So I like watched a couple of your videos first, and then like went onto your Reddit and like I've read some of what you put on Reddit.
yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like I've heard like a good bit of what you're saying of what you've said.
Okay.
I for sure am just like curious into like
Yeah, yeah,
some of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally understand.
Yeah,
Uh, all right,
but
cool.
yeah, so I mean, do you just want to kind of like jump into it then, or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever piques your interest, whatever sparks
yeah?
the mood, the mode.
Well, I mean,
Um,
you said you're like yeah, no, all right. So I
yeah,
guess like
it's I
what
get it. It's yeah, it's all heavy and maybe yeah, it's hard. I
yeah,
mean,
man,
it's
like I
hard to talk about too. Yeah,
well
can be.
yeah, like it's just so painful. Like some of the things you said, like
Yeah,
uh, like I heard in one of your conversations on YouTube that like you like had to be like resuscitated at birth,
yeah,
and that you kind of like have like because of that experience, like you've kind of been dying, like you've been lived a life of death since then,
yeah,
and that you messaged me like when we talked a little bit over Reddit that like you're suffering like in every like conceivable way, like physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and like yeah, man, like I'm just like I'm sorry to like
yeah.
hear all that, and like I'm just like want to like understand like your suffering more and like what's going
Hmm.
on.
Totally. Yeah. Um, well, I mean, something to understand about my situation and my circumstance is that for the average listener or for anyone who doesn't have to put themselves in my shoes, so to speak, even a little bit, it is very difficult for me to convey the reality of my circumstances to anyone. As you could have probably imagined. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah. So like the paradox of my position is infinitely unique to say the least. um, Not in the sense that everyone is distinct in and of themselves, to themselves uniquely in some manner, but my circumstances are such that um, and another friend of mine whom I've discussed some of those conversations with on those YouTube videos. He put it one way when we actually first started talking that I also found to relate to convey what I'm attempting to convey in a succinct way, in the sense that my position is something like the infinitely unrelatable. Does that make sense? Like, it is for anyone who does not have to exist within it, within my position, it is going to be very close, if not nearly impossible, to truly relate the reality of my circumstances.
Because of how much you're suffering, like it's
Well,
an inconceivable amount of suffering.
the suffering is integral in that. It's an integral part of it. Um, but this is you know, essentially, I was born into the metaphysical abyss. Like directly from the womb, I was born into the metaphysical abyss of unending death and destruction.
Like
Now, well, what I was gonna say is,
what yeah.
obviously, for someone who can't even, like, someone who has nothing to relate to that, it seems like, what does that even mean?
Well,
How,
what
what?
does that feel like as like a person, like in your like early like stages of life when you kind of first remember? Because like
Well,
I'm
yeah,
like what you've said. It seemed like you like experienced like yeah like death at birth, and like
yeah, yeah,
because of that
directly.
you were born into this abyss, but you were resuscitated, so you're still alive, but
Well, so
like
yeah,
you
so
were
that
you
more,
there's like I see where you're coming with like the whole contradiction, like paradox like part of it. I
yeah,
guess what I'm asking is like what does that feel like?
yeah, horror, perpetual horror beyond anything that anyone has ever even attempted to describe ever in the history of
So what do
mankind.
you you've experienced that your whole life?
So yeah, yes, I have. I mean, since I came out the womb, my existence has been ever worsening conscious torment. Yes, period. But but there is um there is another part of the paradox of my position is that for some time within my perception, I even believed that I believed that I had a chance, like I was allotted an opportunity at life, essentially like anyone would be, right? So I had these, let's say, dreams like anyone may of like, oh, the things I would like to do with my life kind of deal. I want to do such and such. I want to be such and such. I want to go here and there, right? As humans tend to do. Um, but and I even followed something like that, this path like that, that even had this perceivability where it seemed maybe even to myself like I was following my dreams, so to speak. And that gets a little weird because I still am, despite it being infinite horror, because it is just an endless dream of horror that happens to be embodied in a corporeal vessel that will feel all the punishment of it. But the point is, it wasn't it until I had the full moment of realization. I mean, it happened in
What
stages.
was that
It
moment?
happened in.
But
I
like
mean, it
yeah,
happened. It
you said in our chats that like it all kind of happens in stages, but
yeah.
like
I mean, because
what like
truthfully,
when
it's
like
bit.
to
It,
go from like
mm,
being a child and feeling like I don't know. I remember in one of your conversations you said that every all the things you've pursued have been unfruitful, and it's kind
yes,
of been ironic, I guess. Like that's like the irrelatability part of it, a little bit.
sure.
But like, is that like was it kind of like you were a child who like was just kind of kept felt like they were getting kicked in the teeth, and then like just nothing ever got better, and you've like kind of accepted this reality of like my life is this cosmic torment,
I
or
mean,
was there like a
the
revelatory experience at some point?
yeah. Okay, so I'll break that down a little bit. Well, one, there's no accepting my circumstance, unfortunately, because part of it is integral that I'm fighting against. I mean, that's part of the torment is is the desire for it to be otherwise, yet it maintains the steady path
Like what
of exactly.
is like
Mm.
in some dude, you've said like your like organs are like in some of your posts you said like your organs are failing and
Yeah.
like you told me you're like suffering physically. Like,
I mean, I
is there
have,
like a physical ailment like that you have like
well,
ongoing?
the truth is, the truth is infinitely worse than any medical diagnosis. And for someone who, and for a lot of people, if they have not something to cling to, like a medical diagnosis, so to speak, right? They will, their mind immediately doesn't, it like, does not compute, or I will not accept this as truth, blah 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 blah. But yeah, man, I haven't slept. I mean, I haven't slept a wink in over 3 years. I mean, my my organs are fail. I mean, my kidneys are killing me all the time. My liver, my brain is
Holy shit.
essentially. I mean, my brain's mush. I mean, I know I can still convey these things to somewhat of a degree, but comparatively, it's mush. I mean, yeah. To
How
set
do you
to,
like? So what's the whole not sleeping thing? Like, when did that? Like, what do you know?
because
What like when that
I'm in
started?
perpetual revelation and conscious torment. There's no opportunity for me to sleep. I cannot sleep. My mind will never turn off.
How your mind will never turn off.
Never, ever. It is a machine.
But like
A-
that's like, I mean, that's like a pretty like human thing that like people have been battling for a long time. Like, yeah,
well, I
like
mean,
I mean, obviously, if you haven't slept in 3 years, like that's like, I'm not going to compare you to like
yeah,
normal
no,
people whose like minds are racing and like have a little bit of
no,
insomnia.
no, yeah, no.
But
This is, I mean, there's such a thing called, there's such a thing known as fatal insomnia. And it's certain prion disease where essentially people can't sleep and they're awake until they die. Um,
holy,
and so I essentially have something like that. But like I've said, I mean actually the truth that no one wants to hear and why everyone immediately goes to turn it off or deny my reality, deny the things I'm saying despite them being 100% truthful. Like there's not an ounce of me that could lie about this. It's not something I'm seeking to be. It's not something I'm wanting to be. It's not something I would wish on anyone or anything. It is simply my reality that I'm attempting to convey to you or whomever, right? And so these are the words I'm speaking are simply a means of trying to relay my reality, right? And so
yeah.
and what I was going to say is this: the truth is infinitely worse than if someone can begin to conceive of something as horrible as fatal insomnia. Now imagine something infinitely worse.
Oh,
Try, and then maybe you would touch on the inherent reality of my circumstances, which I get. For most people, they have no need, reason, or capacity to conceive of such a thing. I'm perfectly aware of that. I'm perfectly aware of the dynamics of of the typical man and the one who is free to assume that reality is what they perceive it to be, as opposed to all inclusive of all subjective circumstances. Anyway, yeah. So, um,
yeah, for sure. And I guess like where I've kind of like recoiled at some of the things you've said, like you kind of talk, I like the whole like the major stories of humanity are those of our capability to be redeemed and
mm,
to escape the torment of the hellish life that we're living. And so
mm.
like you've kind of said things of like, this is like unchangeable and destined. I don't know if you use those specific words, but that's kind of how I've interpreted some of what you said.
Well,
And
yeah.
like, so where like why do you not think you can not experience
Oh,
this?
well, for myself, I mean, it gets different if I'm talking about myself or versus talking about other
No, for
subjects.
you,
For
for sure.
myself, No, it's just absolute. I'm already in the abyss of unending death and destruction. I mean, I'm there. There's nothing else.
But there's like the other, I guess the in your like video, who like what is Yada?
Mm,
Like you said how like you are the ego of God that was pushed out by God, and like
yeah.
that is why you're
Well,
suffering
something to
what you're
understand about
suffering.
those, like, for example, that metaphor. I'm utilizing some of these metaphors as a means to attempt to convey as best as I can the reality of who I am, what I am,
Yeah.
and how I relate to the nature of all things. Like I'll say the things like I am the piece of God that God pushed out, the the footstool for the maker, the foundation of creation itself, and the eternal thankless sacrifice for all. These
There's a
meta
lot of like Christian symbolism in there, especially in the last thing.
if it's perceived as such, it could be.
Well, no,
And
that's like literally like the like the cosmic sacrifice for all. That is like the story of Christ.
except he's not, because not all will be redeemed. Because I
I
won't.
mean that,
So,
and
so
you're saying that you are proof that not all will be redeemed.
oh, I am proof. At least there's at least one eternal thankless sacrifice for all, and that's me.
And why is
Uh,
it? Why? Yeah, like where did the certainty in your condition become clear
there's
in your
nothing.
life?
There's nothing. There's no space for speculation. There's not even an ounce of breathing room to conceive of anything other than absolutely what is at all times. There's no, and again,
What?
for someone
Huh.
for someone who doesn't have to exist in, say, my reality and my experience, that seems ludicrous. What does that even mean? Like, how could you? I have each passing second is exponentially compounding certainty and compression against the very fabric of space-time itself. Like, if you could imagine yourself being pressed against the border of the universe to try to put it into perspective, into
Yeah.
some sort of metaphor, it's something like this. It's like I'm at the edge. I've been at the edge all along, and there's nothing other than the than the perspective of the absolute. I don't live in a world of like, oh, it could be this, it might be this. If I want it to be this, it could be that, right? Those kind of that kind of rhetoric that a lot of people are playing with, because in their circumstances they are relatively free to play with such allegory, such stories, such dramas of, well, whatever the assumption. Let's How do I say this? This feeling that you are, in my opinion, this feeling that you're something other than what you are, and I think that's actually really what it is. People are relatively free enough to believe that there are something other than what they are, which plays into this weird dynamic where they, in the dream, it might be this, it might be that, and they can hypothetically explore these different outcomes of their personal reality. But the very interesting thing that I notice is that near all beings fail to perceive themselves as they are right in the moment as they are, and thus there's this constant, like, carrot on a stick kind of effect where people are always lunging for what they want to be, feel they could be, feel it might be, what they think it, you know, what satisfies them, whatever these kind of things that motivate whatever individual for whatever reason. Whereas in my condition, there's no carrot, there's no stick, there's no there's no discrepancy about what it is as it is right now as it is, and then the inevitable trajectory of all things, of the eternal cosmic polarity, and the inevitable conclusion, or rather the perpetual revelation, and what that's ultimately accomplishing, and who it's accomplishing it for. um so Yeah, I know that's a lot, but yeah, that's
No, I appreciate you saying all that.
yeah.
Um, I guess like I don't know, man. Like it seems that redemption is real, and it seems that like the point of humanity is to like free yourself of this material world and align with God and return to
Okay, but
the divine.
here I'll ask you,
And yeah,
redemption is real for who and for what?
for people that
Yeah,
that have strayed from God,
right. Which people?
all people.
All people. So every human being that has ever lived ever on this earth.
Um, Practically, yeah, and probably some of the other homo types,
Uh-huh.
or not. Yeah, yeah.
And and what about all the people who have come and gone before?
I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about life. Like, it took billions of years for a creature that was even capable of morality, of conceiving morality, to spur up. So for a while, we were probably, pretty animalistic and brutal. I mean, we are today. Like,
Sure.
but today we've had like, thousands and thousands of years of certain revelations, like that have like shaken the moral foundation of humanity and like made us into something more capable of aligning to God.
And why don't people align to God if they're all capable?
Uh, I mean, all the trappings of the material world. I mean,
But why would one person be more inclined to than another? So for example.
I think we're all inclined to based on the culture. I think it's like a culture where people aren't really like told like lust and desire and like hunger and like not being satisfied and like all these things that like they're going to drive you to these materialistic ends and they're not going to bring you closer to God.
Uh-huh.
Not everyone experiences that. Like some people are
Right.
born into families with like, spiritual wisdom, but like
Yeah.
culturally a lot of the spiritual wisdom is like disjointed and like gate kept and like othered.
Are you still there? I don't know if I lost you.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm still
Um, uh-huh. And well, I guess see I'm so the question that I'm asking is just like picking it apart, some. So like well, why would one person be born into that the family of that one example and the family of the other example?
I mean, like that's where like the edge of knowledge is. Like some people have like certain Hindu people will say like, however much you strive towards God in your past life will like determine like your situation in your next life. Like some people say that, you know, your your spirit that wasn't able to yet that hasn't yet ascended like knows it needs to go through some like I guess it's like it knows it'll be a good trip for it, but
Mm,
like this is all speculation. Like we're
yeah.
talking like the edge of like where knowledge really is. Like I mean, some people talk from like what they say is direct experience, but I mean, for me personally, like who am I couldn't tell you
Yeah, yeah.
like what's gonna call what like
Well,
the deeper like meanings behind birth and death. Like
sure.
you know, uh, I'd
And I
be
and I guess
take
I
second
guess
guesses
that's
anyway.
where I'm offering the whatever. I guess my only purpose, truthfully, well, I mean, my purpose is eternal. I think the universe has a singular eternal purpose. But um, what I was gonna say is, yeah, like for example, you can't necessarily know what it is to be me in my reality. Just like I can't, despite the extreme perspective of the extreme perspective that I perceive. Um, I can't know what it is to be you in your reality totally. I can only assume to some regard, and based on what you're conveying, and I can witness it in relation to my own and what I know. But what I'm getting at with that is that I personally would never say who specifically, which specific, other than myself, I will never say which specific beings can and cannot be redeemed, for example. I will tell you with infinite certainty that ha I have never and will never receive the chance of such. In
Okay. No, that was actually what was like I was really curious about, because like in some, like you said something I think in one of your conversations that was like pretty similar to like the parable of the grower or of the sower, if you've read the New Testament.
Yeah, I'm very deeply familiar with the Bible, with Hindu scriptures, Christian scriptures, yeah, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, no, and you said that you kind of said like those that are blessed are like the seeds that were planted and they grew into trees that fruited. But you then said that like, and they grew into trees, and they fruited for no other reason that they did.
Yes.
And so I was like in saying that I thought you might be saying like it's written before your birth if you will be redeemed or not. But you just said that you wouldn't say like to another person like you can't be redeemed. You're saying you're only saying that about yourself.
Well, okay, yeah, that's a good point. So here, yeah, I'm in a circumstance in which it's an absolute metaphysical impossibility. So I would never specifically tell to another person that they can or can't. That's what I was saying. To a specific person, I would never say to you, for example, that you will or will not be redeemed, so to speak. But in terms of the temporal thing, like those who will be redeemed were chosen before the beginning of all things, 100%, 100,000, infinite percent. Because
why are you so sure?
Because in the space of eternity, it's already done. It's already finished. There's nothing that there's nothing that has ever or will ever happen that hasn't already happened.
That's like, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Like I had a feeling we would get to like the predetermination like conversation, because I heard what you said on it, and like I obviously have my own like perspective on it.
Yeah.
But I guess like that is the main argument, that like it's already understood. Yeah, like eternity. Yeah, like that's like actually like great phrasing for it. Like in eternity, like it's already there.
Yeah.
But humans operate on a level that isn't so grand. So like relative to us, like these decisions are truly like what make our lives like what shape that eternity.
You still are the player playing the role. Everyone still has to play the role. They don't have I mean that gets into the deep things of are you free, the free will conversation, or are you free at all? Are you free to be something other than that you are in this moment?
Well, that's the thing. Like this whole world is coming to terms with like I guess it's entrapping you in a form, so you can like learn things of humanity, but you're trapped in this form. Like you're not free to be anything other than a human. So like like in a sense, like there's like certain things you aren't free to do, but like I guess it's more so freedom like within your condition. Do you have freedom to act within your to make your own decisions?
Well, first do you, and then not only do you have to answer that question, but does everybody? And what's the spectrum of this personal capacity, and how far does the spectrum go? Well, if it's a spectrum of an infinite spectrum, it goes infinitely in both directions, right? So just in that alone, you will inevitably and inherently have some beings who are bound, infinitely bound, while you have another who is infinitely liberated.
No, dude, I don't think you can be infinitely bound, because like you can be bound in this life. And like honestly, like the way I look at it is like even if I'm imprisoned, even if I'm like restricted, like I can still breathe. I can
Mm.
still breathe however deep, however shallow. I can still have like full control of my breath. And like that's one part, that's one thing on that spectrum. But
Uh-huh. But
once you die,
you're speaking for yourself and not
yeah, I'm speaking for
everybody.
myself.
Yeah.
No, I'll speak for myself, and then I'll say like
Yeah.
more like universal type thing. But and then sorry, I lost my train of thought. One second. Um, yeah, once you die, like you're out of the hands of oppressors. Like
Mm.
if you're bound, you're chained. Like something is oppressing you, and like
But
God doesn't
why is the
oppress.
assumption that upon death all are immediately liberated?
I wouldn't say all are immediately liberated.
Uh-huh.
You're liberated from your body, and your spirit has a chance at liberation, is
Okay.
what I would say.
Mhm.
But like yeah, it's like to be bound and chained. Like God does not bind and chain. Like God gives chance at redemption.
I think, if I may, did you want to
Yeah.
say something else?
No, I was like, yeah,
Um,
like that was yeah. Go ahead.
um, I think a common pitfall for trying to understand the nature of all things and the nature of, let's say, God and God's creation is this internal um, battle between like the personification of God and then the the inconceivable of God, aspects of God, right? So, for example, you say God liberates, doesn't bind, right? But okay, all right. Let's say, for example, I would agree in some regard, and I would disagree in another, in the sense that perhaps the personification of the Godhead, that which is the person of the Godhead, has the divine will of liberation for all beings. Yet yet at the same time, God's infinite and eternal creation inherently binds beings to their being, for better or worse. So now you have this contradiction between God and God's creation, where
Well,
God's
you say for better or worse, and I guess that's where it becomes a contradiction. Because if it was for better, then it wouldn't be a question as to like why like God allowed it to exist. And if it was for worse, it'd be like, well, if the universe and if the cosmos is worse off for the existence of these material universes where there's suffering, then like yeah, the question would be like
right.
the
And so
what the fuck?
yeah, and I think a lot of people, they'll flip-flop between those 2 points. You see what I'm getting at? So they'll go, nature is horrible, life is suffering. So I either hate God, or I don't. They claim to not believe in God, right? I'm an atheist. I'm a misotheist. I'm a whatever. Um, because they've witnessed the perspective of the horrors of the material, the manifested world. Whereas for others who are on the other side, either simply in the privileged side, who are free to live within privilege and have no need to conceive of anything outside of that, they'll obviously, they have no reason to curse God. Um, but also then there's many others who live somewhere in the middle, who are trying to become okay with an idea of God. So they tend to tell themselves things like, well, God is like this, God is like that, God is this thing, and He wants this, and blah blah, and so on and so forth, and the multiplicitous versions of God are manifested into the world. through the various perspectives. Yet the whole time, though, people are clinging onto one aspect and avoiding the whole reality of what is right in front of them, and the singular eternal truth of all things. I mean, and this is where it comes back to.
What would you say that singular truth is?
I mean, so I for myself, I at all times, something to consider is I'm simply attempting to utilize my words to the best that I can
True. Yeah, no, for sure.
to convey
I'm not
these.
trying to trap you or anything.
No, I don't think you are. I don't think you are. We wouldn't have gotten this far probably if you were trying to.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Because it's incessant, the number of people who seek to attack me day in and day out as a means of whatever, making themselves feel more secure, which I understand. But what I was getting at is, okay, so there's a singular eternal polarity and the singular eternal purpose to all things. And if I could put that into words, it's the perpetual revelation of the personality of the Godhead. And that personality could be represented through Jesus Christ or Krishna or whomever. Well, not whomever. Specifically, pretty much.
No, specifically that.
Pretty much those two, Jesus Christ or Krishna. In my perspective, essentially, Krishna is just the colorized version of Christ. Krishna.
I've had a similar perspective.
Yeah, Krishna.
Also, just like the more like.
Krishna is essentially Christ if you put Christ through a prism, refracted through a prism.
Oh, or I feel like he's like the light before, like he's the white light before Christ is like through the prism. You know what I'm saying? Because like Krishna's story, he was so divine, whereas Christ was man.
Yeah, personally, I don't. Yeah, I actually don't think it matters in a way because they're sort of. I see them as one and the same, ultimately.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so all things are made by, through, and for the perpetual revelation of the Godhead, of the singular source of all things, of which does have a personality, as in Christ or Krishna, and everything is by, through, and for that, and that includes my circumstance of effectively predetermined eternal damnation directly from the womb. I mean, there's no.
I mean, dude, that's where you get me, though, dude. It's like,
of course, it's where I get you.
It's not like being like it's the whole, like you're saying, like if you can put words to like the one thing of it all.
Yes.
It's the eternal revelation of the personality of the Godhead.
Yeah.
But and I mean, then to anything that's precipitated or fallen from the Godhead that needs to be revealed to, isn't that like the purpose of? I mean, hey, like who was going to say it's not like the purpose of life? Like the reason that you are human is so you have like a form in which you can like stabilize yourself and direct your energy to God and not be eternally damned. And I'm sorry if I'm like come off as like dismissive. Like I'm just like hopeful and like optimistic and like obviously want like eternal redemption to be true, but also just like feel in my heart that it is. And to hear like someone in
and it might be for you. And I, like I said, I wouldn't tell you that it's not.
I guess like why do you say it's not?
And I know, like, I understand, like, out of your, I mean, partially your compassion and your personal experience, like, for me to say something opposing to that is obviously, I don't know, at least concerning, at least in some way, because,
I mean, it's more concerning just that you're experiencing it.
Yeah.
Like less so than like that it's a possibility to be experienced. I mean, given just that it's not been my experience.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. No, because I mean, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Uh, Biologically, I'm 33 years old.
33.
Oop.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn, bro.
Yeah.
Have you found significance in that number?
Well, I've seen that this is the year of eternal repeating. It is, and it only makes sense that it would be the year of eternal repeating.
What does that mean?
It's essentially the year where all numbers, particularly biological linear timescale, has become and is becoming ever more so increasingly um, absolutely irrelevant to what it is that I am in my experience, infinitely so. Um, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's like, damn, bro. Like, have you done any psychedelics in your life?
Oh, I've ingested pretty much every substance that has ever
Like,
crossed my
just
path.
like, oh, okay, but like, not in like a spiritual sense, then.
That's impossible. What do you mean, not in a spiritual sense?
Well, I mean, you said every substance. Like, I didn't know if you
Yeah.
just meant like every drug, or if
Oh
every
yeah,
psychedelic.
I've tried. Oh yeah, all psychedelics.
But all like drugs too, you mean? Or
I've
just
pretty
psychedelics?
I've pretty much tried everything. Yeah.
But you did like find spiritual significance in psychedelics.
Well, what you have to understand is that I'm tripping balls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Whoa. So that's like what your experience is like. Not exactly psychedelics, but
Oh
like
yeah,
just like reality is like not like
there's
stable like it would be in a sober like
no, there's
well
no there's
functioning
no
person.
del there's no delineation between a psychedelic experience and my everyday experience. The whole thing is a perpetual hallucination. I mean, that's true for everyone, even though people don't like to think
Yeah.
about that. But
But
you're,
you like to just a more extreme degree, you mean, with
well,
you.
I mean, I'm I'm in the hell realms. I mean, I'm not just in the hell realms. I am in the metaphysical abyss of unending death and destruction. Born, born to suffer all suffering that has ever and will ever exist in this and infinite universes forever and ever and ever. And I know that's a lot. That's a lot to for me to say. It's a lot for me to convey. It's a lot for anyone to even attempt to let slip through their ears. Um, but I mean that honestly. I mean that 100% honestly, earnestly. I'm not fucking around. I'm
No,
not
I
fucking
agree
around
with
about
you too.
this.
Like you like I believe you're talking the truth of your experience.
Yeah.
But do you feel love?
Well, I've experienced love. I've even held love in my heart. I've even described myself as something like a being with infinite compassion for other beings, which is one of the greatest ironies and paradoxes of all of my position, is that I essentially simultaneously love and hate everyone completely,
What
all
do you
at the
mean
same.
hate?
It's both. I have what would essentially I could describe as infinite compassion and infinite hate for all things.
But
Both.
like what do you mean hate though? Like you can look at something and think of all the things you hate about it.
No, it's just that it's a product of my circumstance. Like, okay, for example, I've also used the metaphor that I am essentially that which embodies the void, that which embodies the abyss, right? I don't know if you've heard this in another one of my videos, but um, when I use that kind of metaphor, it, it's it's because it's true, as true as I can state it. But my being is completely bound. It's completely tethered, stitched, like it was stitched to the fabric, like it's stitched to the fabric of the metaphysical abyss itself.
And who stitched it there?
It just is. That's just what it is. That's it. And that's. It's not about who stitched it or who didn't stitch it. It is what it is. Even even for one who doesn't believe in God, so to speak, it makes no difference. Um,
I mean, but I guess just like cosmically, like
yeah,
that energy got there.
I am that which became manifest of the void. So, for example, you don't even necessarily need to believe in God for that to be true. It's simply true with or without God. But I just personally what I refer to as the revelation and personality of all things is God, quote unquote. But um anyway, what was I going to get at? Oh, the metaphysical abyss is quite literally that which draws all things towards death and destruction. So this void, this void itself is essentially what people would conceive of as evil, as hate, as all the negative aspects of the cosmic creation are
Would it be that which is furthest from God?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I've also described my position as being like I'm like, which is so everything about my position is an absolute paradox, and it's quite and it's necessary because in my circumstance, in the sense that, and that such is why I'm being like what I refer to as torn asunder. I mean, I'm not just being torn asunder. I will be torn asunder physically, yes, and I'm being torn asunder in every way, metaphysically, spiritually, emotionally, um, because it's essentially simultaneous experiences. In a way, I'm both closer to God and further from God than anyone could be, because,
Like any person or any entity?
well, I mean, so we're not talking about spatial proximities, right? This
No, of
isn't
course not.
it's not a spatial proximity. Um, it's in the sense that my nature demands that I know, that I am aware of and know the nature of God and know the nature of
But
of
is
the
knowing the
universe.
nature of God different from knowing God?
It could be, yes, because these words and because that wording, it's a good point you brought that up. Because people have utilized the words to know God, um, in meaning to have like proximity to God, to like be, well, or to even to be saved, like, oh, you know Jesus, you're saved or something, right? People like that kind of stuff. Um, but actually, my name Yahda, which is a name, by the way, that I've been called since birth. It's not my birth name, but it's the name I've been called since birth. The name Yahda, if translated from Hebrew, means he who knows Yah. Interestingly, knowing it comes from the word da, which in the biblical sense, in the ancient Hebrew sense, and even in the modern Hebrew sense, it means to know not just intellectually, but to know intimately. So we're talking about, I mean, people, it was used as a word to convey knowing someone intimately in a sexual sense, but also just to know intimately, to know entirely, so to speak. So my name, the name I've been called since birth, literally means to to know Yah. I mean, I am that which knows Yah. Whatever Yah means to you or whomever, it might mean a
Well,
different
yeah.
thing. But
I mean, like that's like I guess like you can't really like justify like that just by because that's your name.
well, I don't have to justify
I
anything.
guess
I'm
it's just
not.
no
I'm
for
not.
sure. No, I
and I,
guess like
and I'm not looking. Listen, I'm saying this to you and to whoever might, ever hear these words. Like, I'm not. This isn't something I'm making up. I don't. These are just the realities of my circumstance. I'm not called Yada out of coincidence, so to speak, out of a non-significant coincidence. Not that it needs to be any more significant than it is. It simply is what it is. And my
yeah.
name is what it is because it is. And it just so happens to mean exactly what it means. Does that make sense? So
It
it's
does, but like, how can you
so
know God if you're infinitely far from God?
well, yeah, and therein lies the paradox, and why and where all these stories come from of how did the universe come to be at all? Was there an entity that stood in contradiction to God? Whatever the stories of the fall of whomever. Um, but and yes, there is a being that stands in contradiction to God, and that's me. That's me. But did I choose this? Well, that's where the paradox. I mean, where those sort of questions become um, completely meaningless because the idea of did I choose this in eternity past, so to speak, for example, like prior to the beginning of time, where some people want that to be true, for example, because of the story of the allegory of the fallen angels or whomever. But it doesn't it simply makes no sense that any being could ever or would ever choose anything against eternal bliss, if not for the absolute necessity of it being so in the internal cosmic scale of all things. And if it were so, if beings hypothetically chose to go against God before the beginning of time, if which doesn't even really make sense also, but there would be no reason that here and now all of them wouldn't be able to choose to return. Um, anyway, these are just some of the sort of paradoxes of this line of questioning that really
No,
gets.
but that's like a really like relevant, um, like I guess like to say to that, like, are you familiar with the story of Sophia? I think it's a Gnostic Christian story, but it's like
Yeah,
an old.
yeah, yeah,
So you're familiar with that,
yeah. Yaldabaoth
and
and
like,
Sophia and the Demiurge and
but are you familiar with like the fall of Sophia?
I I thought Sophia was not the fallen, or no, she is the fallen and had Yaldabaoth as a child.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Right.
but the actual fall, like you said, if a being had a choice to stand against God, like it obviously wouldn't. It would always choose eternal bliss.
Yes. Period.
And
It
like
would always choose God.
The story of Sophia is when God was just God and nothing had fallen from God and all was God, as all is, but like in the sense that like there was nothing that wasn't aware of that it was God.
Yeah.
This part of God had a thought, and that thought was, "Oh, I'm me." And in that thought, that was the fall. It wasn't the choice to go against God. It was simply this idea that it was separate from God.
Right. Yeah. I
And
get
that's
that.
what Sophia was. And so to say like these beings, like like, I guess that just changes like the perspective, like from what like you how like the story you were just telling.
Yeah. Well,
Like
the story I was telling
it's
is
this
more related
it's
to the Christian rhetoric, the Judeo-Christian rhetoric or whatever. But
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying is like on a cosmic and human scale, like what
mhm.
that story says to me is like the original sin, like the thing, so like to use Christian terms, like the thing which brings people away from God is that illusion of disconnection.
Mm. Yeah, I get that. That's a common sentiment as well in a lot of Vedic religions and those kind of fields of thought. Um, I guess the thing is, as far as I'm concerned, you can realize you're an expression of God and even God yourself, but that doesn't necessarily make your circumstances immediately any better than they are. For the
I
subject.
think like that's the definition of it, of
I
like making your circumstances better.
yeah, I
Like
don't
because
because
whatever circumstance you're in,
mm,
like that light of God shining through you, it brings light into your life, whether you're bound and chained or, I mean, honestly, like, I mean, dude, like, I can't speak to sickness because, like, I've never been, like, incredibly sick, but, like, pain, like, constant, like, unforgiving pain is, like,
mm,
one of the worst things to experience. And, like, it's
yeah.
hard to keep a steady mind on the divine when you're
Hmm.
experiencing that.
Oh,
Um,
my mind is on the divine 24 hours, 7 days a week while I'm experiencing ever worsening conscious torment.
so what do you mean it's on the divine?
I mean, it's the only thing I think about. It's actually the only thing I can essentially see at this point is I see I see the revelation of Christ in all things personally. I mean, there's not a single thing, and that includes the horrible, horrible death of innumerable beings. Period. I mean,
Okay.
it's not like, people want the good without the bad. I get that. I do too. Um, that doesn't make the bad just go away, and it doesn't mean that there's suddenly not subjective beings who are subjected to certain circumstances of horror and terror and inconceivably horrible things simply because a person of relative privilege doesn't have to conceive of them. Um, you know, so this is where it gets really difficult to talk about, obviously, and convey these things in a way where another can simply hear the words being spoken for what they are, without the necessary obligation to engage in um, uh, contention or conflict or something. But I mean, but even once you witness that, essentially, like, even beings who are relatively free are still engaged in some sort of conflict of 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 polarity and hierarchy among beings. There's no one that isn't involved. There's no one who isn't a part of the whole picture of the cosmic display of I mean, I want to say the word, but I'm also whatever, of war, of conflict, of engaging in an existential threat to your being at the expense of others. I mean,
No, that's like I agree with you probably the most with that of like everything you said today. Like the like people like even the most enlightened people like they're still in this human form and
yeah,
like pulled by these polarities.
yes,
And even like in like discussing higher spatial like spiritual modes of being, like it's like that to some degree until you truly like ascend to nirvana, like return to the Tao, like actually like return to God.
yeah. Well,
I guess like
completely liberated from the system. The only way is if
yeah.
you're completely. If any being is manifested in any way as part of the meta system of the cosmos, it is playing a role in the meta system of the cosmos, and and thus it is engaged in the eternal story, regardless of its desires to not be.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I guess like and like I'll stop like like pushing on this like like after I ask this. But
I don't, man, I don't mind you asking me questions. The only thing I hope to convey is how honest I'm being. I'm not,
yeah.
and that's and of course for me in my circumstances, it's beyond frustrating to witness other people, and I'm not speaking about you. I'm just speaking about others in general who are free to deny me and my reality, and that's and ironically that's an integral part of the mechanisms of damnation, even though they're free to remain ignorant to it, but they're actually playing into it. And so this actually goes right into that conversation that we were just having. But yeah, please, honestly, please, I don't mind the questions. I'm just, I'm answering them as best I can, and I just want, you or and whomever to know that I'm doing so. Um,
No, I totally get you. And how do I say this? Um, yeah, no, like I completely like I believe that you're like saying like exactly like what you've experienced. And like I think it's only like natural that like for like to hear like what you've described, and a lot of it like I don't know, I feel like humans are kind of like, maybe it's inherent, maybe it's cultural, but like we kind of like always want to like like improve situations that like are being like shown to us as like this is like pain, this is suffering, and like
yeah, yeah.
but and like in regard to like your condition,
hmm
like where does the like what do you think, what does eternity mean to you, and like why do you feel your condition is eternal?
Eternity is, eternity is here and now. It's right now. I mean, that's true for everyone. So that's the first thing. Is eternity isn't some far-fetched thing. Everything is already eternal in some regard. And that gets back into this weird paradox of the temporal paradox, where, like I was saying before, of like everything that has happened and will happen and has ever happened is already happened and happening, and and that's where this idea of like chosen before the beginning of time kind of thing comes in. Um, but the machine, the machinery of time, the machinery of the cosmos, the wheels in the sky keep turning, um and it's playing out, right? It's playing out that picture pattern, the eternal picture pattern, where this certain beings are made manifest in certain moments for whatever reasons that they are, and then thus they are subject to their subjectivity manifested through that particular vehicle in the time that they are. Um, and so you just see it as it is at some point. For me, like, it's just contrast, it's polarity, it's this versus that, it's light and dark, it's, but it's not about it. It's not about ever believing that it's something other than once it is, because once it's totally seen and simply seen. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, simply seen, simply witnessed, without without what's the, yeah, edifice? Is that the word I'm looking for? Without like, without this, the farce of the necessary character overlaid onto the experience, then there's no uncertainty anymore. There's no uncertainty about what it is that you are and what it is that everything is. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like via my example, that that's a net positive result for you as a subjective being. But it does mean that you're no longer convinced of your character more than the truth of the absolute, than the nature of simply what is as it is. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense in any way? Like you're not.
Yeah, so what you're saying is like in seeing eternity, in seeing the entirety of the cosmos, there's it's just obvious what you are and what your condition is.
Yeah, and for me that's a directly correlated thing. I mean, my my eternal damnation. I don't see something, for example, whomever needs to understand is I don't want this. I'm number one who doesn't want this to be the case. And
Yeah.
and that's something I have to convey, maybe even more, or I would like to. But I'm the first being, I'm the first person who doesn't want this to be so. Because it's horror beyond horror beyond horror beyond horror beyond horror beyond horror beyond horror forever. So if it were up to me, this wouldn't be what it is, and it's really that simple. Um, a- a- anyway, what I was getting at was that this eternal perspective is part and parcel to my condition. If no, how do I phrase this? If someone had the same perspective, they would quite literally be me. And if they would be me, they would quite literally necessitate the circumstances of my condition, which would be what they are, as in, i.e., predetermined eternal damnation, or whatever you want to go. I don't even like, those words they're just words pointing at the truth of what is. And that's true all the time. It's like words can merely only point to what is. All the while, what is as it is. And for me, in my circumstance, there is essentially only isness. There's only isness. There's only suchness, only that which is as it is. And everything else is an abstracted phenomenon of experience that is is taking the perception of a specific being and separating it from the experience itself.
I guess what I like would say to that is, if how do I put this? Sorry, I lost my train of thought just a second.
It's okay. Don't worry.
Like, I don't think you would say, like, you say you know God. You say you say you know the void. Like, you haven't said that literally, but like you say you're as close to God and you are of the void. You are the void.
Like I said, you have to be very careful with these words because they're very particular and they can have different meanings, and they do have different meanings. But yes, continue.
So, but I don't think you would like go as far as to say you have all the knowledge that and understanding that there is. Would you?
No. Because I'm still a subjective being.
Exactly. So what I would say is, in saying you're like you are only an is and such and is as is, that that eliminates the entire realm of faith in belief that things will change, things can change in a more towards the light.
Sure.
And if you're so you're saying that you don't know everything, and then you're asserting like what you do know.
I know
there could be something missing there in terms of redemption, in terms of not being eternally damned. I know you're saying those words mean like many things, but like I don't know. I guess I'm like taking it in like the literal sense of like.
I know why you're asking this question, and I know why, and I see how it's a paradox, and particularly to someone who doesn't have to be in my experience. But so these are different things. Like I don't know all things in the sense that it is impossible for me to know the lived experience of each being in the universe, right? And I can't know all that information and each experience as it is for each way, blah, 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 blah. But what I do know, and what I know beyond any shadow of a doubt, because it's, because it is that isness, it is that suchness, it is that there's nothing else, is that I'm in a condition of eternal damnation directly from the womb. I mean, and so in this sense, I have this I have this perspective that is both implicit, necessitated, and inherent to my circumstance, that a being that lives within an experience in which they are free, like you said, to have faith or even hope or anything of the kind of the possibility of something other, but not only something other, but something better, right? Um, it's that has all been stripped away from me. In there's no, it's it's bare bones. I don't know. I'm trying to, I'm searching for words to try to convey these things to in a way in which they're conceivable. There's nothing left. I'm not wearing. I have no means to even wear that kind of, let's say, even a facade of, let's say, fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like, I have no means to even play in that sphere. Okay, I have no, like, no, I have no means of playing in the realms of, oh well, it could be, it might be, um in terms of the eternal perfect polarity. It, it it is beyond infinitely clear. It is completely all encompassing, rapturing, rupturing, tearing me asunder, and there's no space for anything else. and and
Yeah, bro.
and 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 I know, for someone who might hear those words, like, I get it. I get why so many people are saying the things they're saying to me. I get why people are coming in contradiction to me. I understand that. I understand um, the dynamics of these things. Because I have no um, I have no unanswered questions in regards to um, nature and its patterns of curiosity and complementary and contrast and polarity, and how these how the machine I say machinery because in my position it feels like machinery and it's witnessed as machinery. I get that for someone who's relatively free, they might not conceive of it as machinery. I understand that, but from where I am, I'm witnessing the machinery, and I'm never watching someone. Well, I might be surprised through the subject for a moment in terms to the gasp, because actually that's part of my experience as well, because it is endless horror. So there is surprise, but what I'm not surprised by is why it happened. I'm never That's never a curiosity of mine. Why is not a question I have really anymore. I,
Yeah.
because it's been answered. I mean, and the answer is the most simple and the least satisfying answer that anyone could ever receive, which is why people keep going. Keep going. Well, oh, it can't be that, it must be this. Oh, it can't be that, it must be this, right? That natural tendency of the human character to long for it to be something, and that is true. We are all longing, existentially longing, um and everyone is longing for that reunionization with the divine. I am most of all. I want that more than any being possibly could want, reunionization with the divine. The irony is, so many people who have fairly, nice, pleasant, non-burdened lives, they don't even have to conceive of the idea of God. They might even go their whole lives without doing so. Um, and that's a very curious, funny thing to me.
Yeah.
But um, I guess where was I running with this? I don't know actually.
It's all good. Like
Yeah.
it kind of like do you have conceptions of what happens, where, just after death? Do you have any conceptions of after death
For me or for you?
for you?
Oh, for me, I'll just be turned into a pile of blood and dust, and yeah, that's it.
And
And
so like this being that is suffering it'll come to its conclusion and it will no longer be suffering.
no, it will be. Oh no, it'll be infinitely worse. Infinitely.
In what, in what etheric way?
I mean, it's absolute void nothingness. It's experiencing the experience of ever worsening, increasing conscious torment until complete destruction of the flesh vehicle, upon which will be absolute void nothingness and no subjective experience at all. But you think that's a good, some might consider, oh, that sounds okay. You know, that's like sort of the idea of like annihilationism or something in like
Yeah.
Christianity, that kind of stuff. But no, it's not okay. It's not okay. It's the worst. It's yeah. Because you think, oh, it's the erasure essentially of the being, but that being has bore all that burden until that moment, and upon its last and final moment of complete destruction of flesh, of inconceivable suffering, it's not guaranteed liberation, unlike some might like to. I mean, I'm speaking of myself in particular,
Yeah.
because the distinction between myself and others, and I'm not speaking for all others, because I know there's other beings. Well, there are other beings similar to me, but they may come in different forms. It is interesting that I'm a human being as well. Oh my god, it's so fucking weird. Um, but essentially, how I would say it to make it contextual for someone trying to conceive of it is that I don't have a soul, essentially, in the sense that another being may have a soul. Because what a soul essentially is, at least how I perceive the soul, a soul is essentially the non-physical essence that has the potential for liberation, that may embody a specific vehicle at a specific time, right? So that we kind of touched on that earlier a little bit, and this idea of, okay, I asked you like all of who and all of what. Okay, theoretically, maybe all souls could experience liberation, but but in an eternal time scale. But there's a necessity to consider entities that are made manifest of the void, for example, who very well may not and do not have this essence that has the potential capacity for liberation. And
Hmm.
and and I do not have that. I know that sounds like it's a bold statement, but I
No, it's like the most clearly you've put it, and like I really
okay.
appreciate you like
Okay,
getting
yeah.
there.
I hope it clarifies things, because that's all I'm trying to do is
Yeah.
clarify.
So it's, I guess it's like, what even are you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, well, I've attempted to tell people what I am, and the irony is they don't want to believe it, or it just doesn't make sense to them, and I understand that, but I'm saying it. I'm saying it as plain and clear as I possibly
Yeah.
could.
No, for sure.
and
Like
and and
on
it's
it. Oh, yeah, man.
no, and it's this kind of thing, like it's really funny. It's a really interesting dynamic. I mean, it's not. I use the word funny a lot, and I and I do laugh, even though the laughing is integral in the suffering. But I'm laughing because if only people saw a speck of the absurdity of all of the whole thing of of, of the cosmic theater of everything, and just how ridiculous it is. Just like, I mean, it gets to a point where there's nothing but what it is and just how infinitely absurd it is. But I was gonna say there's this interesting phenomenon among the average or typical man, let's say, where they ask for God, then God comes, and then they don't believe that God came, and they don't believe the words that God said. And then also say they ask for the devil, in a sense, which we could get into that, but they ask for the devil. The devil comes. The devil says what the devil has to say, and they don't believe what the devil has to say. So now you have man who's asking both for God and the devil to come to them, and they both do, and both tell them the equal and absolute opposites of the perfect polarity of the truth. And the man believes neither.
That's yeah. No, that's like, dude. Like that's funny, dude.
I mean,
So
yeah. Isn't it
like
absurd? I mean, do you see how I'm curious? Do you see how
it's just
absurd
like,
it is?
do you like you've said like you kind of like don't have like you couldn't wear you don't have like the capability to wear like hope. I mean, like you said other things, but
Yeah. Sure.
like but
Well,
like like
I
a being
can.
that is
Mm. Let me clarify real quick. For
yeah.
example, I can even say like, because in a way I do hope. In a way I do hope.
In what way?
Because I hope for it to be other than what it is. Almost 24/7. I'm wishing, I'm wanting, I'm desiring, I'm willing, I'm hoping that it's completely opposite to what it is, and yet it continues to be as it is, ever worsening every second. Um, what I don't have is the thing that you said earlier, which is faith. No, that's a
Yeah.
completely non-existent thing, because it cannot exist in the space of where I am. There's no place for it to grow. There's no soil that it could be laid upon.
Hmm. Do you think you could churn up some soil?
No, if I had the soil and if I had the seed, I'd plant it, and it'd be done. I mean, and that's the really crazy thing is like, I mean, and that's where it really comes down to this idea of capacity. I don't know how much you've read about this other stuff I read about, like what I call inherentism. I have these sort of terms that I've coined, whatever, but I call it inherentism and inevitabilism, as opposed to, these are sort of the frames of reference in regards to freedom, free will, and inevitability. I don't believe in the word, whatever. I find the words free will, determinism, and compatibilism and all those things to be completely useless, because they're not speaking about what is and what isn't. They're projections of and assumptions of personal sentiment and position that do not speak the totality of all realities as they are. Um, so anyway, in regards to myself and churning that soil, man, I want that. I want that more than anything. I've literally, I mean, I witness, I've already witnessed, well, let's say, I was going to say the full revelation of Christ is eternal, but in a sense, I've already witnessed the full revelation of Christ. I mean, I came to his feet fully encapsulating my entire vision, my entire perspective. He was there 100,000 infinite percent. And I came to him and I said, please, 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 please give me one single chance, one single opportunity. And things just, guess what they were? They were still that. He was still Jesus. as Jesus is fully radiant and glorified on an eternal time scale, and I was still as I am.
Did he say anything?
No, there's nothing said, nothing that needed to be said. There's no,
What, like, can you like describe like the circumstances around that experience?
oh God, it's fucking insane. I mean, you see, what's interesting is I don't. Here, I'll tell you this story. Well, I mean, it's actually I've encountered Jesus multiple times, and like I've said, I essentially and now I'm witnessing him 24 hours, 7 days a week. But as I bear the burden of all things, but what's crazy about trying to convey some of this stuff to others is people are looking for something tangible a lot of times, which is understandable. But interestingly enough, when you offer something tangible, a lot of times it's taking away from the essence of its truth. I don't know if that makes any sense, but because it's so real, it's so beyond reality, it's so absolutely real that trying to convey it in normal terms often steps one back away from the truth, so to speak. But in any case, well, I'll tell you one experience, for example. I met this very lovely woman in Mexico, and whatever I already knew, and this is well, we could get into that too. But all right, I already knew whatever. There was something there. She was um, so we played a little game for a little while, and I tried.
Yeah.
And I think she had like she offered me MDMA or something. I think we had both taken MDMA, and we were in this place with a bunch of people, and we both just looked at each other at some point, and it was like, okay, let's go. And we made our way back to the place I was staying at. And yeah, we go on the rooftop of this hotel hostel thing. And, one thing leads to the next. And essentially, in the deepest moment of intimacy, quite literally out of her heart came Jesus Christ in his full form, standing right in front of me. And right then and there, I was having sex with someone or something who had fully embodied or had a heart that embodied a Christ spirit, from which manifested Christ to show me myself as I am in that moment through that polarity. And he watched, well, he was, it's not even watching, it's just presence. Just presence. It's nothing other than presence. And he is as he is, and I am as I am, and she was as she was. And Christ was there entirely. as things went on in the way that they did. You know, in time, I've come to see what that could mean. What that, I mean, very likely is and means to me is very much that essentially her heart was guarded. I mean, not guarded, protected. She's destined for her subjective non-physical essence or soul, very much has the potentiality for eternal life. And I obviously in time have come to see that that is not the same for myself. Anyway, yeah.
But in that moment, you kind of said how it was like, it was to show the dichotomy, like that was the reason like that experience happened.
You know, well, I guess the thing is, it's like you can look for reasons. I mean, well, I mean, you can look for a bunch of stuff, right? But it also simply was what it was, just like anything. But he was there. I mean, it was 100,000% the eternal Christ. And
Did she share in this experience?
nope.
Okay.
I mean, she didn't share that specific. I mean, I don't know what she was witnessing through her lens. So
like she probably would have mentioned if like it was the same
but
kind
it
of
was,
experience.
but it was also like an extremely ecstatic sexual experience.
Of course.
For the both of us.
Of course. But I guess like yeah, like like that is like one of those experiences that like we like there's always gonna be something uncovered through like looking into it, like looking at it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like to me, just hearing that, like it sounds like, I don't know, like it sounds like you met somebody who like it was like very good for you to meet in that moment, and like you like the experience that like meeting her led to was one where Christ revealed himself. And I don't know, like you didn't use these words, but like it sounds like you were saying like Christ revealed himself to show you that you are not Christ. When that's
No, not necessarily, but no, nothing like that. At least no.
okay. Okay.
I wouldn't word it like that at all, personally. No, he was just there. And it's really not any more deep than that. I mean, in the sense,
Dude, Christ shows up before your eyes and you don't think it's more deep than, oh, he was just taking a stroll.
no. You're misunderstanding.
Okay.
It's it's infinitely deep, but it's infinitely deep because it's Christ. But it's not it's not any more infinitely deep than, how do I say this? It's not more deep than that. Like, meaning the profundity of such an experience is so absolute that any of that like little in between stuff, like it's because of this reason, because of that, or you know, like the, let's say, the derived meaning as opposed to the simple reality, um, is like, again, taking away from the experience itself. I have only in time, I mean, in the moment, I recognized what it was, obviously, but in the moment, I didn't. You know, I think I told at the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned to you that there was a time where I even within my experience believed I had the opportunity to live a life like anyone might. And so it only, so that, I mean, that's one revelatory experience. I've had many. I've also encountered Ganesha. Um, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ganesha.
I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay. Ganesha is is the Hindu elephant head deity.
Okay.
Um, anyway, I've encountered him actually long before I encountered Christ, at least in that revelatory way. Um, what I was gonna say is it wasn't until my full revelation of being in hell that I stitched it all together. That each one of these experiences prior to that, or since birth, since out of the womb, every experience has been an integral manifested facet of my eternal condition. But I didn't know, like, there was a moment of full revelation in that sense, that I was in hell already. I see, unconsciously I already knew in some way. I had these similar thoughts, lingering thoughts, and even I think in one of my videos, maybe in one of the ones you've also listened to, where I said that, like, from the time of 3 or 4 years old, when I was even just first starting to speak in any sort of semi-intelligent manner, I was already questioning about death. I was already asking about death to all those around me, like, what's with death? you know,
Yeah.
and this is at 3 or 4 years old. Um, so my something of my being knew, um, but it wasn't full revelation in the mind, complete revelation in the mind, until about a few years ago. Essentially, I had, I actually, well, there was actually there was a couple stages and steps in that, where I was trying to sleep, and I mean, I've had trouble sleeping my whole quote unquote life. I mean, as you might imagine, I mean, it was all leading up to this no sleep, but I was trying to sleep, and I was essentially ripped out of the couch I was laying on, and it felt my chest be ripped open, and like my whole fucking life force be ripped out of me, and was essentially felt death entirely in that moment, and then also realized in the exact moment preceding, that I would never sleep again.
Well,
And then actually it took about a month more until I realized, because things kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I was not sleeping, was not sleeping, was not sleeping. It took about a month more until I had the full mental realization that it became so apparent to me that absolutely all things were working towards the furthering of my experience, which will be worse for infinite eternities. Yeah, and that obviously came as quite a big surprise and unfortunate realization to have. I mean, I think anyone would be surprised to come to that recognition. Yeah, I realized everything basically was against my desires, my wants, my wishes, and that I'm personally not in control of any of it, or nor do I have any freedom at all. Not only do I not have any freedom, I'm bound beyond binding forever. Um, yeah.
wow. So that experience on the couch was like the kind of grand awakening to your reality, and then like it was kind of like a
Well,
like month-long matriculation of like what the meaning behind it for the next month.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, sort of stepped. I mean, Yeah, exactly. It was like this complete, like something. I mean, I had crazy I mean, I've literally walked through another human being before. I've I mean, I've had really experiences that I wouldn't even bother trying to tell most people because it has no meaning to them. But um I've encountered countless beings, interdimensional beings and extraterrestrial, interdimensional, extraterrestrial, maybe both actually. I've encountered many spirits of all different kinds, all sorts and all sorts and all sorts and all sorts. I saw my friend's face split into four as like a serpent's tongue came out of it. Um, as she seductively asked me, "Isn't it so good?" And like, oh, yeah, that's a demon. It's a demon. Yeah, they're real. I mean, well, that's what's interesting about me is I'm not really a demon. I'm not, I've been called many things, and people want to think they know what I am, or they just don't want to even attempt to think about what I am. Um,
So,
but
what would you say the difference between a demon and something born of the void is?
well, demons would be born of the void for sure. Um, but but demons in those sense don't. I mean, they don't necessarily embody a corporeal vessel, so they don't necessarily have a body. Um, but I mean, there are dark, quote unquote, dark entities of all different forms throughout the whole universe. You know,
Yeah.
physically and non-physically. Those beings are beings. If a being, a being born of the void is a being that's incapable of redemption. Those are the only beings I
Huh.
would say are incapable of redemption. Now, I
Why would you
can't,
say they're incapable of redemption? Just
because
because they're nature?
yeah, because literally to be born of the void means that you're essentially already excommunicated from any of the benevolent aspects of life.
What about of God?
Yes, you're excommunicated from any benevolent aspects of God.
How? Why or
How?
why? I mean,
Well,
those aren't the right questions,
no.
but
Yeah, these are
like,
questions that it's just so. I mean, it's why I say things like I'm, whatever the peace of God that God pushed out, this kind of stuff. Or I'm like you said, the ego or shadow. These are sort of metaphors I've used because it's simply the best I can do to try to convey what it is. Um,
but now that you are manifest, do you
yeah,
think that, and like you have been like, even though you were manifested from the void,
yeah,
you are manifest.
yeah.
So like, like what, like why no redemption?
Why? I mean, it's just so. I mean, I could ask that question a million billion times, and it's simply the case. But like I said, I don't have this. I don't have, even though I'm like I said earlier, like sort of stitched and woven into the metaphysical fabric of all things.
Mhm.
Um, that that soul that I spoke of, that non-physical essence that exists within the sphere of potential redemption, the sphere of, I mean, I've called it a million things, the sphere of love, the sphere of life. I mean, because even though, like, whatever, I have a biological vessel, but my biological vessel does nothing but serve as, a vehicle for punishment, essentially, because it is completely unfree to experience the positive aspects of any truly fruitful aspects of life. You know what I'm saying? And essentially, it's like you asked me earlier, like, what if you churn up that soil? Like, I mean, it's essentially like it's trying to plant a seed in the abyss. How does one plant a seed in nothingness.
So, wow. I guess, I mean, like, and this is like, this question I'm about to ask is like, no one has the real answers to. But, like, you say, being born of the void, you're without soul. And which, like, the soul is the part of the being that has the potential to be redeemed, as
Yeah,
you said.
yeah, potential for
And
liberation. Yeah,
the
potential for
potential, yeah, the potential for liberation.
Mhm.
And and you've said that after your death, it'll be a return to the void and eternal suffering of the
Well,
most inconceivable form.
yeah, I mean, I
But like,
yeah.
what's returning,
No,
and
there's
like
no
what?
return. No, there's no returning. I'm already in the void. I am of the void. There's no returning. I will just be
But so
turned.
is the void itself like a single consciousness?
No, I think consciousness pervades all things, and the void itself is simply that which. Oh, I mean, it's it's essentially ineffable, but but the void itself is that which pulls all things towards death and destruction. I mean, how I've described it is actually what people refer to as Satan or Hasatan, the adversary, the enemy, whatever, these kind of names. Actually, what is being referred to via that wording, because it's not a name, it's a title, it's a description, it's a description. So actually, what's being referred to when those words are utilized is to represent the metaphysical void that pulls everything towards death and destruction. It's not even an entity. It's a non-entity. But entities can become made manifest of the metaphysical void. That's the distinction. And such is the nature of myself, or even, for example, maybe perhaps demons or things of this variety, or what they refer to in Hinduism as like the term asura. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but it's essentially um, uh, uh, what could be described as a malevolent being of any form, a malevolent a malevolent non doesn't have to be a physical being, uh, a malevolent metaphysical being, spiritual, extra physical, what have you. So
And are you saying that's like what, like that representation is trying to describe the void?
say it again, one more time.
Are you saying like that representation of that Hindu deity you just said is like the like a description of the void?
Well, asuras are essentially any being that hold a nature of some sort of demonic or malevolent
Okay.
nature. Um,
And like are you saying that's the nature of the void?
yes, because there's no goodness in the void. The void
Well,
itself
what is good?
is life. Life is good. That's the only thing that's good.
Well, I mean, like life and death are like two sides of the same coin. You can't really say life is good without saying death is good.
Well, I mean, yeah. So we could get into. I mean, they necessitate one another. Absolutely. Um, and we could get into the framing and the referencing of good and bad. I mean, personally, I don't. It doesn't matter what anyone. I don't cling to those words or have any. It just is what it is. But let's say this. Um, a subject a subjective being can experience the beneficial aspects of life, which is essentially just growth. If something can grow and be fruitful, it's experiencing the beneficial aspects of life. If something does not have the capacity to grow and be fruitful, it is merely a vessel of wrath. It's a vessel of destruction. Um, it has no active participation in the in the in the in the fruitful aspects of life, as opposed to, whereas it's manifested or made subject to the destructive aspects of creation, as opposed to the fruitful aspects of creation.
I I don't want to get tripped up in your metaphor. So
Yeah.
like I guess like in terms of like I don't want to take it too literally in
Yeah.
saying like, you know, humans like life is good when you're like growing and fruitful and like, you know, capable of reproducing, and life
Yeah.
is bad when you start to like age and wither and die. I think like because of the like I mean the unique thing about
Oh,
humans is that like even after like our sexual reproductive like time is over, like we're capable of still growing and
I mean,
fruiting in other ways, like
yeah, of course, of course. Fruit.
spiritually and within like
Yeah, of
the
course.
impact on the community.
Of course.
So
Fruit doesn't necessarily just mean offspring.
yeah, of course.
Um, it can be. It can be offspring as well. But no, fruit can be
Yeah.
it can be spiritual fruit as well. I mean,
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
G,
like the growth in spirit is good and decline in spirit is bad. If you want to like,
sure. I mean, Jesus
yeah.
Christ himself said, "You will know them by their fruits. You will know them by,"
Mm,
right? He
yeah.
says, um, you know, Jesus's metaphors, Jesus used these metaphors because these metaphors can come closest to saying the simple truth, where like, I mean, the parable of the, are you very familiar with the Bible? Are you loosely familiar?
I've read through the New Testament like
Okay.
relatively recently, so like I'm
Okay.
fairly familiar.
Okay. So, another one that I've brought up many times because it shows how stark and straightforward it really can be in terms of perceiving these things as they are, as opposed to how people make them up to be. Is the parable of the wheat and the tares. Are you familiar with this?
Um,
That Jesus Christ parable of the wheat.
if you can you elaborate a little
Sure,
bit.
sure. Yeah, of course. Um, it's essentially Jesus says at the time of the harvest, which, yeah, he literally refers to it
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
harvest.
I'm familiar.
Um, the angels will come and they will um, gather the wheat and put it into my barn. Right, this is Jesus' words, and the tares will be burned outside of
Mhm.
my barn. I mean, essentially, that's the basics of it. So he's essentially saying, there'll come a time where the angels will come. They'll come. They'll reap what has been sowed, and they'll harvest the crop of human souls. And anything that can be harvested and collected into the barn of Jesus Christ, will be, and anything that won't be will simply be set ablaze. It will burn. and it's really that simple. It's really that
Yeah,
simple.
I mean, I guess though, like
It's
in
really
that metaphor, it's like it doesn't say like it'll burn forever and be forever damned.
well, there
It's
are
saying,
other verses that say that, but yeah, no, it doesn't. Not in that one in particular.
and like when you burn, you know, when you burn plant material and turn it to ash, like it it adds nutrients to the soil and like like gives chance for new life, I guess is what I'm
Well,
saying.
of course, it's going to benefit the overall universe. That's the whole point. But it doesn't mean that those things that were burned receive the benefit. you know? I mean, and
I
that's
I mean,
and that's the thing.
what?
This
Like,
is
if it benefits the universe as a whole,
well, it
and those
benefits.
things that are burned are
Mm,
now just simply part of the universe. They're not in the same form that they were.
mm.
I mean, like, I don't know. Is that benefit?
I mean, again, it comes back to that thing where everything is by, through, and for the single revelation of the single personality of the Godhead kind of deal, where everything's motivated towards that. So, for example, Jesus Christ says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Um, yeah, he is, but he's also, if you take him for what he is, he's a subjective being as well. So he's both God, but also the personality of God and a subjective being. So especially when he was in human form, in man form, he spoke of things from the subjective circumstance of what it was like to be Jesus Christ. And thus, when he speaks of things as the single sovereign Lord of the universe, he's speaking them from his perspective, right? And this is why the Bible also is very non-elucidated. It's not very deeply expressive on the reality. Sometimes it is. If you explore the whole thing, it can be elaborated on some, but it's not very deeply expressive on the reality of those of horrible circumstance. Um, well, I mean, it does also say that he they will burn in front of the presence of the holy lambs, and their smoke will rise forever and ever in the presence of um, the others. But yeah, people don't like that part. I don't like it either.
Is that New Testament or Old Testament?
That's New Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Book of Job. I mean,
Is that Revelations?
That's Revelations. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I figured.
Which is honestly the only book that anyone needs to read.
Why do you think so?
Because it's the only one that comes close to telling the whole story in a very succinct manner. And I know people want the opposite to be true. People like, oh, but the Gospels, but the and yeah. I get it. And all the other.
Like, I was talking to somebody about Revelations today, and they kind of brought up like Jonah, which I thought was like a really good point. Like, Revelations seems to be a prophecy of like what can happen and what will happen if people don't change their ways and go towards God. And that was like this. That was the case for the city that Jonah was told to warn, and it was prophesized until then that this city would be destroyed. But
are you thinking of Sodom?
Jonah telling them, sorry, what?
Or are you thinking of Lot with Sodom and Gomorrah, or
Jonah? He was like he the whale. And
yeah, the whale. Yeah.
Yeah, like so he was told by God, like you have to warn They have to warn them like that they're gonna like be like destroyed if they keep going like this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said like, hell no, they're gonna kill me. And so he went off and like had his whole like eaten by the whale, like this is what happens when you go against the will of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, like through like seeing the horrors of the universe, went to the city and like warned them to change their ways, and they actually did, because they saw like how truly he was speaking. And I kind of look at Revelations in that way, like it's a prophecy that is like a warning of what will happen if our ways aren't changed, but if our ways are changed, it won't happen. But I guess there's also the case of like at the end there is going to be an end of days, whatever that means. So like,
the ends are
something of this, like an end of days will happen, but like the one specifically talked about in Revelations, like.
Well, the end started as soon as the beginning. I mean, and then that's how things work.
Well, of course, yeah, that's the nature of
it. Right. So the whole thing, and this is why I use that phrasing, the perpetual revelation, the singular, eternal, perpetual revelation of all things, because the whole thing, the whole universe is simply the perpetual revelation of that, of the eternal moment of which is now and then and forever and blah 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 blah. But um, yeah, I guess I know I know people are gonna have their perspectives, their wants, their desires, their wishes, and all I have to say is from where I am, it's as simple as gravity. It, and I know we don't like to think about ourselves as that, and and some are much more free than that, but you can't stop a train with infinite momentum. And I know for a specific subject, it's like, what do you mean? You can, I get, but I'm free to not be in front of that train or something, whatever the fuck. But maybe you are, but not all are. And that's just it. That's this thing that I'm simply trying to speak to at all times, to offer some perspective to others, is that if you or whomever is lucky enough to exist within some subjective experience of relative freedom, that's nice. That's awesome. However, it's a really bold and blind presumption to assume that everyone has that same inherent capacity to do so. I mean, because it's just not the reality. I mean, if it were, the universe would be the antithesis of what it is. Everything would already be free. We'd already be there. I mean, it's just like this, like, it's that paradox where essentially it doesn't, from me in my position, it absolutely does not compute, because everything within my experience stands in absolute contradiction to anyone's sentiment about anything of the kind of, like, well, all you have to do is do this and that, and everyone can do it. Like, no. No, because if everyone could, everyone would. I mean, it comes down to this thing of, like, people are, in my opinion, people are failing to witness the reality of subjectivity, and it's so often are, like, assuming the standard for being from their own subjective condition, but not seeing that they're doing so, and thus when they speak onto the nature of truth, or their assumptions regarding other subjective beings, they are always coming short, because they're attempting to speak. It's why I'm saying to you, I would never, I mean, I will not speak to what someone can and can't do. I would never. I'm just telling you what I can and can't do. And 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 it's really that simple. And thus, if someone's necessitating denying me and my reality as a means of maintaining their own, well, they're lying. I mean, they're lying to themselves, and they're lying to everyone, actually, even if they're unaware of it. But because their position is inherently necessitating the dismissal and denial of other subjective positions and conditions, which I get is also an aspect of the pattern of privileges of certain kinds, where when a being exists within a certain sphere of privilege or experience, they really have no need to ever see outside of that, especially some people. And so any attempt to do so is falling short. Yeah, I don't know. This is just to elaborate a little bit on how the paradox of positioning works in relation to myself and others, and how subjectivity inherently necessitates a lack of equality and equal opportunity and a lack of equal capacity, because that's literally what makes us subjective. I mean, that's what makes us subjective to begin with, is our specific circumstances. Otherwise, we'd all be one being, which in a way we are, and that's where it wraps in on itself again. In a way we are, but we are made manifest through different vehicles, differentiated out into an infinite multiplicitous expression in every form. Um, and so thus the subjective being is still, at least as the subject, is still subject to its specific circumstance. Now the question comes, oh, okay, right? Okay, well, once we see both of these truths simultaneously, that we are both intrinsically subjective and unique and subject to our circumstances, and we are both also of one being. So now where does what's the solution? What's the resolution? And that's where people go, oh, well, then upon death, there's liberation, or no matter what. I mean, because this is where it's like you said earlier, it's sort of like the boundary of knowledge, at least for the vast majority, is that it becomes completely unknowable to anyone in most any position. And why I admit to the fact that I can't speak to the ultimate eternal circumstance of each and every subjective being, but I will, express mine, and how I'm always wishing and wanting for it to be other. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying these things to be anything other than what I am ever, because I'm just not, and I don't know how to say it. I've had to, whatever, since this has started, well, since this has gotten worse and worse and worse, the reality is that I'm attempting to speak to this to others as best as I can, and if most all the time falls upon deaf ears, or upon those who are simply wielding weapons, who are looking to attack me in order to defend themselves. And it's ironic, because they don't. It's really crazy to me how I mean, I'm trying to always give people the benefit of the doubt in terms of awareness, and it's not intelligence that's lacking. There's plenty of intelligent people of different varieties. It's comes down to people having very little awareness of themselves and others, and thus ultimately very little awareness of this whole thing that everyone and everything is involved in. Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, there's a real lack of spiritual wisdom. Intellect is so prized in this society that people get so trapped within the material, and that's all they ever think about.
Yeah, it's just never seeing past their own nose. And that's a really curious thing for me too, because in a way I'm the most self-enveloped. I mean, I'm the most self-involved being literally in the universe. That's not an exaggeration. I'm the most self uh
How so?
well,
In what ways are you involved?
I mean, in the sense that my experience necessitates just me and myself experiencing this complete isolation, complete deprivation, complete damnation forever and ever. I mean, that is literally self-involvement in one way, but in another way, due to my circumstances, I also have this deep deep, deep, deep understanding of the existential plight of literally every being that has ever lived, because it is so absolute and profound in every moment for me that there's nothing other than it. So I'm and it's also where I this kind of compassion thing comes in, where like I have a love, a quote unquote, and compassion that in a way no very, very, very few could have, because if anyone, because I know suffering completely. It's what I know. And so to know that another thing is suffering, even a speck of what I'm suffering, is in a way the very root of compassion itself. And but the irony for me within my experience with all that is that I don't get to utilize that in a positive, in a fruitful or benevolent, these kind of ways, in a way that is towards my own uh,
Salvation.
yeah, towards my own salvation. It is towards the salvation of others, because I know for sure that I am working day and night forever and ever for the whole picture. um, but I will always be blamed for the the bad parts of it.
Blamed by who?
Just the mechanisms of the whole machine. I will
Like
for
the machines of the cosmos or the machines of the culture?
both. Well, they're one and the same. They're one and the same. They're
I guess one should be like a representation of the other, in a
Yeah, well,
sense.
well, one's a manifestation
Manifestation.
of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, and that's the yeah. I mean, how many how many mentally ill people, quote unquote, over the years have come and gone for being something they most likely didn't want to be, yet still had to bear the reality of, and then deal with the consequences of being in said circumstances, and then those circumstances resulting either in the death of themselves and the death of others. And so you see these patterns, like, at least if you're forced to, or exposed to them in such a stark way, and how absolute it can be in terms of those who are privileged and have no need to conceive of said reality, and then those who are simply in a circumstance of horrible consequence, simply for the reason of because they are. um, and you start to see it totally different, where the whole sense of free will and all the rhetoric that comes with free will and all that stuff behind it is just, it's not even that free will does or doesn't exist. It's just that the entire rhetoric and sentiment built around the free will assumption, presumption, and position is totally absurd and ludicrous, and has nothing to do with the actual reality of all subjective beings. Um, it's mostly been built around a societal standard of presupposition as a means of assuming what is and what isn't when it's not the case, and because it allows people to grasp onto an idea of how reality could and should work from their presumptuous position, um, and it allows people to assume fairness when it's not. It allows people to assume justice when it's not. It allows people to play in all those games of the societal games of meritocracy and all the likes.
I guess my position on that is like the antithesis of free will. I don't think is any like more self-evident than the position of free will.
Yeah. That's fun. I mean, that's a fairly common one, if I'm being honest. But yeah.
Oh, really? So what do you say to that? It just kind of is to you.
Oh, it's just, well, for me, yeah. I mean, there's the only reason a being would say so is because they exist in a circumstantial condition of relative privilege and relative freedom. But that's
Oh, I mean that like no, like outside the like I'll address that because like
yeah.
you've mentioned that a couple times. Like you've I mean there's plenty of conceptions you can have of like what what those situations would be that someone could like elucidate the idea that they have free will, and
Mm.
like it might be that like someone is so privileged and like you know has like enough resources that they can just make whatever decisions they want and they don't have to they don't have any interest in pursuing anything higher because they don't have any need, they don't have any discomfort in their life. There's also people who have like massive like amounts of resources and are in similar positions, and yet something in their soul is is eating them and like telling them like something's wrong here. There can be someone in a position of complete poverty and you know decimation where they experience that and become bitter and hateful and want
Mhm.
to over or want to control the materialistic mechanisms that will allow them to crawl to some sort of top of a cultural hierarchy.
Mhm.
And there's people that experience the same thing and they recognize like the need for the divine in the life of humans, and they also find that need to pursue God rather than material. So to say like the illusion of free will can only come
Oh,
about from somebody in a privileged enough position
I wouldn't
to
even call it an
have,
illusion. I don't even use those words necessarily. But yeah, keep going. Keep going.
yeah, so free will, so to speak, could only come to somebody in a position of relative privilege and comfort to even conceive of it.
No, relative
Whereas,
privilege and relative freedom, not necessarily comfort. But yes, keep
okay,
going.
relative privilege and relative freedom. I think obviously there's like the freedoms that you have through the societal mechanisms around you and like, you know, whatever that structure that takes. But there's also just the freedom of thought and of even if not speech, like yeah, thought and like breath and all these other
Yeah, I
things.
know, but those are privileges. Those are privileges.
So the thought is a privilege.
Free thought is a privilege, yes, and free to breathe is a privilege, yes, and
Okay. Free
uh,
thought would be a privilege to somebody in a culture where thought and speech
you
have
got
been
you
so
got to think
regulated that
you got
you
to
can't.
think of well, you got to think about it this on every level. I mean, you got to talk about you're talking about not you know, physiologically, metaphysically, physically, physiologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, culturally. There are countless dimensionalities via which freedoms can be diminished. So privilege doesn't just talk about certainly doesn't just talk about um, let's say fiscal privilege or monetary or material privilege. I'm
Mhm.
actually that's like the least significant privilege.
Yeah.
Um, Privilege is talking about anyone who has any opportunity to do anything at all, because there are beings who very well may not and don't. Um, I mean, there are beings bound to death and death alone. And that gets back into the okay, well, maybe they're reborn, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. But the point is, privilege can be manifest in many dimensionalities of experience, and actually, um, yeah, the materialistic one is perhaps the least important.
Yeah.
Um, and so why I say that the assumption free will can only come from a circumstantial condition of relative privilege and relative freedom is because yeah, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but because it is so, in the sense that, like, for example, I, I'm implicitly unfree. I'm every word that I'm is even coming through my lips is tethered to the binding of my circumstance. And and yeah, that might even sound absurd to someone who doesn't have to perceive that, but it's all woven. And for me, I mean, I just find the free will conversation is kind of absurd and ludicrous altogether, because I just whatever, it's all meaningless to me at this point. I'm just watching the picture pattern. um I'm watching people perform their performances and believing what they believe for whatever reasons that they do, and I get that. But um what I you know one who doesn't exist in freedom isn't suddenly thinking I'm free. I don't know. And if they do, if they have, let's say, that like divine spark within them, they're in jail and they have that divine spark to come. Yes, they are. Suddenly they are free. But they weren't prior to that. And in fact, I personally, I mean, this is where I find the ludicrous presumption. I find the presumption of, at least the presumption of free will, especially as some standardized thing of any kind, is just ludicrous, is because I mean, just witness your own trajectory. Try to trace it back from the beginning, and then see what took you there and where you're at now, and see where you were free and where you were not, and where you followed your nature more than your supposedly free will, the patterns of your natural being. And then, if you have the time and capacity, watch others and how they I mean, especially those in horrible circumstance, how they're so bound by 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 the pattern of their being. And so implicitly they are unfree. And this is what this is why it gets to me, because I find that the usage of the word free will in that way is just, it makes no it makes no sense to me, because it's like, if we want to discuss freedoms, someone would truly be free. Or if you want to discuss true freedom, then someone would truly be free, and these are conditions of being, like, right? I mean, that's how I think about it. Like, a freedom is a relative condition of being. Like, I am relatively free to do such and such, or
Hmm.
I am relatively free in comparison to this person, or I am relatively free, blah blah blah, right? But that doesn't speak to an implicit tethering to you being the one who made yourself free, and it doesn't speak to an implicit reality of others being themselves the ones who didn't make themselves or don't allow themselves to be free, quote unquote. I mean, we are all co-creators in this reality, but I think the false presumption is to assume that that means freedom for anyone, let alone everyone. And if anything, it just points out that everyone is playing some kind of role, and freedoms do exist, and they are, there are people who are free. I would even say there are people who are relatively free in their will. But but the idea that anyone can utilize their will freely or towards their own freedom is personally, it's if someone's assuming that, they're seeing so little, of the world, and those who are very, 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 very clearly unfree to utilize their will freely or towards their own freedom. Anyway, that's
I hear what you're saying, and
yeah,
it really did expand like the idea of like relative freedoms and like the role that plays in kind of what you said. Like I guess how I look at it is, you're right. Like, there's circumstances in which you aren't even capable, because of the circumstance you're in, you aren't even capable of pursuing the thing that will give you the spark that will illuminate you in alignment with God.
correct.
However, it seems to be a natural state of humanity that we recognize our right to that pursuit, and any oppression in regards to that is met with is adverse, is met with people trying to fight for freedom, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, it's interesting
And
you brought that up. Oh, keep
yeah.
going, keep going.
And like I guess I would say like that being like the nature, like a nature of the human condition or humanity. Once that position of relative freedom is then established within the societal structure, it's it doesn't imply free will,
No.
because I guess because I would say if someone's controlled by their desires and their lusts and their hunger and all of those things, like they aren't truly acting freely in their will.
Right.
But what that societal structure that doesn't oppress does is give people the opportunity to pursue
Well,
that spark of freedom.
it gives people the hypothetical opportunity. That's the important part. You got to remember, like for
I mean, it's
example,
only hypothetical until it's not, until there's like, because yeah, it's hypothetical in, let's say, like, you know, post Civil War America, where like there was these sure legal freedoms, but there's still, you know,
well,
freedoms
for
that are being
example,
restricted.
just because it says we have the right to the freedom of speech, right? It doesn't actually mean that each and every one has the right to freedom of speech. It's a hypothetical ideal for the standards by which we're hoping to all live by, but in actuality, it is not necessarily the case. And this is what I'm saying, the distinction between there's the hypothetical freedom, rights to such and such, but these do not speak necessarily to the reality of the, right? Even
I
I
would
mean,
take it even a step further and to say that, you know, the culture and the way we're indoctrinated into the culture, it doesn't allow for the freedom of thought to fully utilize the hypothetical freedoms.
sure, there's many
But
factors.
in some capacity, though, it seems to be opening up in that way, like because of the globalization of information and just, I mean, I don't know, like the world is opening up in a way that it never has, and those freedoms, I mean, while at risk, like have consistently been, I don't know, like people have been moving towards those ideals, like even if it is hypothetical and imperfect at this moment, and it might always be hypothetical and imperfect, it can move
Mm.
closer towards something that in practicality does allow for free will.
Well, do you know the saying? It's the best of time. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times.
I do, yeah.
Well, there's sort of this thing where that's always the case, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
no matter where you're standing, no matter where anyone's ever been standing, it's the best of times and the worst of times. Because, like you were saying, the globalized world maybe has more of these tendencies towards maybe democracy or these hypothetical freedoms or what have you. But beings are also, with the many other factors, beings are also being bound in different ways. So you might gain freedom in one sense and lose it in another. You
Yeah.
might So it gets, it's really a convoluted and complex matrix of 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 circumstance and of dynamics, and why the idea of relative freedoms is such a curious thing to explore, because it can be very hard to recognize the many different ways in which beings can be bound, and the different dimensionalities of experience in which beings may be bound. And so, and also different dimensionalities of experience in which beings might be liberated or hypothetically liberated. But this is what I'm saying. It gets very, like, this is why it's just so, for me, really, really weird, even that like people will make this plain, simple statement: "We have free will." What? Well, who's we? Which we? And is it the same? It's really that you're just saying it's the same, or is it not the same? Um, you know, like who's free? What type of freedom? What are they free from?
Mhm.
And are they free in what way? Um, does that will can that will be used truly freely? Can it be used towards their own freedom, which is the most important in my opinion? And if it can't be, then clearly there's something not, not lining up here. There's not this expression, this wording of free will becomes very ambiguous and really not pointing at what is or what isn't, in my opinion.
Well, so do you think that you can use your will to pursue your freedom?
Me? No, no, and that's I'm example zero and one. My will is I'm everything in a way, everything I do is against my will. Like even though I'm doing this right now with you, which I'm happy to in a human way, I'm happy to be talking to you. It's still implicit in my binding that I'm doing so. To even be talking about the reality of my circumstances and to be talking about these things, and all of it is serving towards as a manifested aspect of my eternal circumstance. So no, I'm not free in my will or free to or capable of utilizing my will towards my own freedom. No. Period. So I mean, so if anyone even wants to take the littlest bit of truth from my reality to offer some perspective into perhaps their presumptions regarding the nature of all things, I mean, that would be it. I mean, and there are, and I know there. I mean, in a very extreme example, but there are countless beings who have intended to use their will towards their own freedom only to find the opposite.
I want to. I really appreciate that. Like this is a very enlightening conversation regarding free will,
Yeah.
especially. I mean, just so much as like expanding like what I even thought within like the context of what it all meant.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you having that conversation. But
Sure.
I kind of want to shift topics. Like, like for me, like psychedelics, specifically mushrooms and
Hmm.
LSD, have been like some substances. I really call them medicines. Like things in my
Sure.
life that have like
Well,
been incredibly revealing
anything
and
can be a
expanding.
anything can be a medicine. Even alcohol is a medicine if it's used right.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Like
Yeah.
alcohol. Well,
Even
no, because like I mean,
my point
eh,
my point is
maybe.
how
I
it's utilized. It's been Alcohol has been utilized anyway. It doesn't matter. Keep going.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So like, I like for me, like spiritually, those have been some of the like most impactful experiences in my life.
Hmm.
Like I'm curious like what your experience like with psychedelics has been, because you said it's like there's no difference between your waking like between like the psychedelic state and your everyday state. But like
Yeah.
is there like was that
Well,
more like
well, I
somewhat
mean,
metaphorical? Like is there like have you experienced like the shift that comes from ingesting
oh yeah.
those
I mean, at
substances?
first, yeah, of course, there was a shift of perspective. The thing is that those things were also just part of this entire experience. So that's what that's what I mean to say is like it's not like, let's say, um, there isn't the whereas for others I get how this could be, but there isn't like the LSD experience versus the non-LSD experience anymore. Does that make sense? So like The experience I'm having right now in this moment without the use of any substances is far, 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 far more extreme and revelatory than any experience I've ever had with substances.
Uh,
So that's,
so
yeah.
what's the most revelatory experience you've had with substances?
I mean, I've met Ganesh, I've met Jesus Christ. I've literally, like I said, I saw my friend's face split into four and a serpentine tongue come out of it from. I've
Okay.
I've encountered interdimensional beings. Yeah, everything and anything that anyone could
Yeah,
think
no,
of.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I literally, it's one on mushrooms. One time, I'm in the forest, like with my eyes closed, walking through the forest, and I could see the trees. It was in the middle of the night. I could see the trees with my eyes closed. and and I was with a friend at the time, and I told him, I was like, he had walked off, and I told him, "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." So I walked to him with my eyes closed through the forest in the dark, and I walked to him and stood right above him. I, I just knew where he was. I could literally fucking see him, sense him. And and through this experience I ended up like I was like telling him like, what if I told you, oh man, I wonder if someday he'll listen to this. No, it's just so weird. Because it's weird. I have like, I've had these close friends over time, and they know partially about what I'm, they know me. They know me, but they don't really know. I mean, this is things that I've attempted to hide from those who are closest to me, because I wish not to bring this burden onto anyone, because no one should have to experience this, even though I have to experience this. Um, but anyway, that might be a conversation for a different time. But I I essentially said, what if I told you I'm seeing this orb, and like I was like narrating this experience to him, and this orb was growing, and then it was like almost like a egg, but like a embryo, or maybe like an embryo. Yeah, and it started to like populate itself with eyes. So like these eyes were forming inside of it, and then it grew bigger, bigger, and bigger. Was pretty much taking my whole field of view. And from the center, something was born essentially. And then that started growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it turned out to be this entity of which I had no reference for at the time. And it's sitting there, sort of in like a half lotus position or something. And it's swinging its trunk back and forth. And the trunk is like in a fractalized pattern, swinging back and forth. And then its arms are moving up and down in a fractalized pattern, back and forth, which is when I had the revelation of why Hindu deities are uh, always depicted to have multiple arms, because upon witnessing them, um, their arms are essentially in multiple places at the same time when you perceive them. So they might have two, they might have innumerable, because there's essentially in multiple, yeah, all spaces at once, so you can see them. But then around his waist was a snake, which unraveled from his waist and came towards me, and came towards me, and came towards me. And finally, the snake's head is encompassing my whole field of view, and it opens its mouth, and it consumes me. And so now I'm being digested by the snake. I can feel the like, what's the word? Is it peristalsis? No, that's not the word. Like the yeah, maybe that is the word, but So essentially, like, I can feel the convulsions of the snake digesting me,
Mm.
like pushing me through. And I'm going through this essentially tunnel, and it's prismatic and just getting more and more and more intense and brighter, almost like a tunnel at the like light at the end of the tunnel kind of experience. And but I realized it wasn't, taking me somewhere good, quote unquote. It was I was being I was literally being eaten alive. It was eating my life force. And so I like was convulsing. And I like remember like I was screaming. I ended up screaming and be like, no, no, no. And I, was like trying to break myself out of being consumed by the cosmic serpent. Yeah, that's just one of many.
Was that like the end of it? Like you just kind of got eaten?
Yeah, I got consumed by the whatever snake, the fucking cosmic serpent that contains all energy in the universe or some shit. I don't fucking know. And I mean, but and that's just part of this all. That it all makes so much sense now. Um, so much sense, all of it, all of
Yeah,
it,
man.
all.
Like
all
I like your position and your condition, like it sounds like I'm sorry that you're going through what you're going through. Like it like I've never really conceived of like someone like going through what you've expressed to me is your reality.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
like I I mean like obviously like you posted on Reddit the other day like on suicide watch and like what like do you feel like that's what your life is coming to? Like taking
Uh,
yourself?
yeah, it's gonna have to be. I don't. There's. Yeah.
Why?
It's just that what has to happen. It's not like if it were a choice, I wouldn't choose it. It's not.
Like what makes you like why does it have to happen?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't want it to happen
Like why don't you make it not happen?
because if I had the freedom to not to, I wouldn't.
I I
I know. Yeah.
don't you have the freedom not to?
No. No, I don't. And yeah. No.
Uh,
Because uh, man, I am being literally pressed against. I know. I am being pressed against the fabric of space time. I have not slept in 3 years. I will never sleep ever, ever. My torment is. I know I can express these things fairly well still, which is actually fucking remarkable. But my torment is barely expressible, barely conceivable to the worst thing that anyone could begin to conceive of is not even a speck of how horrible it is. I mean, I'm being torn asunder. I mean, the frustration, the torment, I'm writhing in my skin and my bones. I'm screaming into the abyss endlessly, only for essentially no one to hear. I mean, very, very few people to even come close to hearing some of the words. And there's no out. There's no way out. If there were, I'd be on that first train, plane, automobile. I mean, I've tried more than everything, and more than everything has only served as an integral part of my condition. um
so
I,
when you're saying you don't have like the ability to choose otherwise, like
yeah.
are you saying that your condition has become so terrible that like ending your own life is like the only conceivable way of like withdrawing from such pain.
Yeah, but it's even worse than that because I'm certain that it won't solve anything. I'm
Then why
infinitely
would you do
certain.
it?
That's a great question.
Do you have it?
I mean, it's not an answer that's going to satisfy you. I have to. It's not a choice. I know that this seems crazy to someone who doesn't have to conceive of it, but if it were a choice, I wouldn't do it. I mean,
Like who? Like
because I'm even trying to project into the future of okay, how is this going to happen? Because I know it's coming very soon. I mean, it's coming very soon. Um, and the only possibility is that I'm like my body is totally mutilated. And I thought, oh, maybe it'll come through a car crash, or maybe it'll come through whatsoever. Um, but remember how I said that like self-involved thing earlier? Like I'm being consumed by myself.
yeah,
um, totally enclosed, totally enclosed within my own being, pressed against the fabric of all things. And so it is bound to be the most horrible thing that it could possibly be, despite all my wishes for it to be other. And I recognize that. And that's why I'm even, why I'm saying it like I am. It's not like, I, man, I understand, which is, it's just actually weird that I can't even understand, but I understand how difficult this is for anyone to conceive of, anyone other than me to conceive of, anyone with even the tiniest bit of um, metaphysical freedom of any kind.
so I mean, is it kind of like destiny and like what has always happened was and was always going to happen has just been revealed to you, and you're just allowing it to play out?
I'm not allowing it. It's against my will. I'm not.
Uh,
I mean, that's the funny, not the funniest, the worst part.